Okay, so I started the recording. So if you look on page 22, towards the top of the page, we see Macbeth says, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late, and I have brought, you know what, actually, let me pull it up. We can look at it together. Okay.
I have a question afterwards when
Yep.
you're...
Good. No, that's what we're here for. All right. This is where I really want the questions to come, obviously, because you can't ask me questions when I'm doing the pre-recorded ones. Let's see if I can find this. Scene 4. Scene 6, and it should be the next scene. Whoops. Is this it? Yes, right? Oh, help me. Okay, where are we? I don't have the page numbers. That's frustrating here. Scene 7.
Just before Act 2.
Right. Oh, there. Right. Okay. So I'm just trying to find that. Here we go. So everyone sees this? I got this up properly? So we see here, Macbeth says, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late. He's talking about killing the king, right? So remember, at this stage, Macbeth is going back and forth. There's been a prophecy that he's going to become king. The question is, do I have to do anything for this prophecy to happen? And maybe I don't have to. Maybe it'll just happen. The other things happen just without me having to do anything. But Lady Macbeth will have none of it, right? She's saying, no, we have to take action in order for you to become king, which of course speaks to that whole idea of fate and prophecy. If it's going to happen no matter what, then it shouldn't matter what actions you take. But Lady Macbeth is much more pragmatic. She says, no, we have to. And she goes through this whole thing. I won't go over it in detail because we went through this, where she is shaming him into doing it. And right down to this incredible, what she says here, right? Where she says, if I had, I'd kill my babies if I promised to do so, in so many words. I'm not going to break a promise. So what you have to take noted, going back to the question on the specific thing that's said, is when Macbeth says, if we should fail, he's turned the corner here, right? She has convinced him. He's now back on the side of doing it, because now his concern isn't with the moral elements of killing this good, nice king who is very good to Macbeth. Now it becomes that other dimension in criminal behavior, if you will, is, can we get away with it? And this is where Lady Macbeth says, okay, if we fail, we fail, but we're not going to fail, because listen to the plan. All right, so she lays out the plan here, and clearly Macbeth is impressed with that. So when he says, bring forth men, children only, for thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males, it is, at least my reading of it, this is him praising her, and it ties in with her speech earlier. Remember when she says, unsex me? So it plays in with bringing forth men, children only. Yes, it speaks to, they don't have an heir. So yes, bring men, children, so someone can take over after me, which addresses the issue of Banquo, the prophecy that the Weird Sisters told Banquo, that his children are going to be king. But I think it's also talking to his admiration that you are so good at what you do, and of course the concept of a woman doing what women are supposed to do at the time also involves bearing children, and better yet, bearing male children. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Open this up again. Someone had a question as well.
Sorry, yeah. So I think, I'm not sure if I understood, well, initially it took me like time to like read over because the wording, as you mentioned, it's complicated. I feel like, is it me, or are they speculating that they probably have um, like a witchcraft spell on them? Because I feel like there's a point somewhere in one of the acts where they talk about it, but are they aware, or they're
Okay, it's a good question because we're seeing so many of these supernatural elements, the weird sisters. If you've read into the third act, there's ghosts and things like that. If there's anything that strongly suggests that an actual spell was cast on Macbeth and Banquo, I don't see evidence of that.
okay?
Okay, and I think what it really is, and I think if there were, we'd have a very different play, because that would suggest that they don't have control, right? If you're hit with a spell, then you have no choice but to do what the spell dictates you do. I think the strength of this play, one of the many strengths of this play, is it is by choice, and that allows us to see how Macbeth in the early scenes struggles with that choice, while Lady Macbeth doesn't. And that's important in terms of watching how their characters evolve
Yes,
through the play.
but the reason why I found it confusing was because if it wasn't for the Weird Sisters, their thought process wouldn't have evolved into what it is. And there's a lot of moments in the stories where they're contemplating and hesitant about what they've done or if they should pursue with like the execution of the others. So it's
Oh,
like I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like it's like hard to like differentiate like if they're fully aware of what they're doing because they actually genuinely feel bad, or is it because they're influenced by the Weird Sisters? And I think in the Act 3, I know you didn't speak about it, but there is someone called Helcom, I think her name is.
Hecate.
Yeah, and she clearly says, "What have you done?"
Right, and when she's talking to the Weird Sisters, she's the like the leader of the Weird Sisters. She's a goddess of evil of sorts. We're going to look at that scene. It's one of the most controversial scenes in the play. In the world of Shakespearean scholarship, the general consensus is that that scene was not written by Shakespeare, and that it was inserted into the play at a later date. And most productions of the play leave that out. We're not going to. We're looking at the play as a whole. We're gonna be patient because we're going to look at that today. And I think I understand what you're saying, but it's again she seems to be more chastising them for not keeping Hecate in the loop. Again, there's no, I don't see any firm evidence that they've ever cast a spell. And again, the reason, one of the main reasons, one is I can't find evidence in the text. And the other is the whole idea that you just brought up about the struggle, right? You know, should we or shouldn't we? If the spell was cast, there wouldn't be a struggle. They'd have no choice, right? If you're hit with a love potion in most traditional spells with love potions, you can't help you. And what Shakespeare does in his comedies, to quite pronounced effect, where there's just there's no control, and you're not even questioning it because you are under the influence. Here, because it becomes particularly relevant, when we see how Macbeth changes, and we see this starting in Act 3, where he's no longer hesitant. As a matter of fact, he's reversing roles with Lady Macbeth. Keep in mind, when he lays the plans, we're going to look at this in a couple of minutes, when he lays the plans to murder Banquo and his son, he doesn't tell Lady Macbeth about it. It's not her idea, it's his idea. Not only is it his idea, she's out of the loop.
Okay, so, okay.
Yeah. So again, the spell would be consistent if there was a spell cast on him. The real issue here is choice. I mean, it gets to, the idea of the tragic hero usually is one who is doing things without realizing how bad it is what he or she is doing. The most obvious, famous one is Oedipus, right? He doesn't know that's his father that he kills at the crossroads. He doesn't know it's his mother that he married. And that's why it's a tragic situation. Macbeth is a little more difficult because he is aware of what he's doing. And he moves from that struggling to where he now becomes just basically cold-blooded, which starts in Act 3. And how Lady Macbeth changes, where she is seemingly the cold-blooded, analytic attitude towards these murders and this regicide, and then when things start changing. And we see that very much. It's actually a good way to segue in here. Where am I? Let me just put this here so I can scroll down faster. Let's see. Hold on. And I'm gonna, there we are, Act 3. And let me just quickly, because I know some of you sent some chats, let me take a look at those before we move on. Okay, so let's just, since we're and this is what we want to do in these virtual classes, is get these conversations going. Okay, so the question, and I think this is a good way to get into this Act 3, okay? So he kills the king and they have regret, and yet they right away go and kill Banquo, yet Banquo never gave them reason to. Okay, so I'm gonna read this out loud because I don't know if you can all see it, if you don't mind, so that we can address these as we start looking at this Act 3. And he still needs Banquo's son as an heir. And also there's a lot of talk about a ghost joining the party. Okay, so the question of Banquo, okay, why does he kill Banquo? All right, sorry for the spoiler for those of you who haven't.
He killed Banquo because he don't want him in the way of his crown.
Right, he sees Banquo now as a threat.
Threat, yeah.
And that ties in with the prophecy. They tell Macbeth, you will be king, but you won't have heirs to be king. And they tell Banquo, you will sire heirs to the throne. So now that Macbeth has taken that leap by killing Duncan, right? And that's transformative. His doubts, not only do his doubts about the morality and all that seem to disappear, and now he has to preserve his situation. And
but is it because here, because there's a point where Banquo says, like, kind of questions him on his act. So could that be also perceived in the sense that he felt out, like, not, I don't know if I understood, like, he felt as though maybe like Banquo would have, like, maybe not been like loyal or would have kind of rat him out.
Macbeth absolutely feels that. That's why he has Banquo killed, because in the logic, right, if Banquo knows that his sons will be king, okay, well, they can't be king while Macbeth is king.
Okay.
And of course, Macbeth's mind now is all wrapped up in distrust and conspiracy because of what he did, because he engaged in that, right? Now, but it's interesting with Banquo, because we see here at the very beginning, right, beginning of Act 3, Scene 1, we get, right, it's just Banquo on stage, right? He comes out at the beginning of this act, so he's by himself, and here he's reflecting on what the weird women promised, right? And he's saying, okay, thou hast it now, King, Cawdor, right, Thane of all these. It's all happening. And he says here, I fear thou playedst most foully for it. Banquo is expressing his belief that possibly Macbeth did kill the king. Okay, so he's already suspicious of how Macbeth became king. Understandably so, because he was there when the weird sisters made their prophecy. Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings. Right? He's reflecting. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine. Why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope? So it's an interesting bit of a transformation in Banquo here, because previously we saw Banquo, when he was reflecting on the prophecy, he was very much towing the line that Macbeth once held, insofar as saying, okay, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I'm not going to, I have no control over that, and I certainly am not going to do anything bad to make it happen. Here he's acknowledging that, Macbeth might have actually done something bad, and he doesn't shy away from it. He's not disgusted by it. He's not saying that he's going to go and kill Macbeth. It's not an admission that now he is going to take that role of Macbeth to kill, to achieve the prophecy. And it's on a bit of a side note, again, the risk of causing confusion. This play is based on histories that Shakespeare had access to. So these are real people of the past, and in the history, at least in the history as it was in the material that Shakespeare had access to, Banquo actually is an accomplice in the killing of King Duncan. So he changed, again, this is artistic liberty. He changes Banquo's role and I think to the better, because it becomes much more, I think, profound when they split. Right, they're best friends. They're comrade in arms, brothers in arms. Now there's a rift beginning, and it starts here when Banquo is saying, "I fear that you actually killed." So he's not gone over, if you will, to the dark side. He's not contemplating, or it's not clearly indicated that he's contemplating killing Macbeth, but he seems to be willing to accept that Macbeth may have committed regicide. And there's no indication here that he's going to turn him in, because, okay, this is now continuing the pattern as prophesied by the Weird Sisters.
But so the character of change of Macbeth affected the character of Banquo.
Yes, I mean,
the changing.
yes, I mean,
Like in the first act, Macbeth was not sure of some things. He was back and forth going. In Act 2, he changed. He want to kill the king, and he's also going back and forth. In Act 3, he killed the king. In Act 2 he killed the king, and in Act 3 he's more sure of himself. He wants to kill Banquo, so he will not get in the way of him.
Yeah, I mean, more. Yes, I mean, very, very much so. That's a good summary of how his character evolves. Though I'm not. It's not, maybe not so much that he's sure of himself, as much as now that he's there, his attitude is, I have to preserve this. Now I am king, and now I have to be sure that I stay king. And Banquo would have every reason in the world to get rid of me, because then that allows his children to get one step closer to the kingship. That's how Macbeth is thinking. There's no indication that that's what Banquo plans on doing. He seems to, in this speech here, he seems to be saying, okay, Macbeth went over to the dark side. I can live with that. I'm not saying I'm going to go to the dark side, but that seems to be taking me one step closer to my children being king one day. But
I have a question.
Mhm.
First of all, why would he kill the son? He needs an heir. Why would he attempt to kill the son?
because that's not his heir.
Yeah, but he doesn't have an heir.
Well, yeah, but he doesn't want it to be Banqua's heir because it would have to be someone, he doesn't have an heir. It's a good point. But if it goes to Banqua, then it's not him. He'd have to adopt, right, in order for that to be his heir.
But I have a problem with this because the only reason he started on this venture is because he believed that the three witches or sisters were giving him a prophecy.
Mhm.
So if indeed he really thought that Faith, it was on his side and he just helped Faith along, shouldn't he also believe that Banquo's son will take over?
Absolutely.
And also, I don't view, I'm having a very hard time, as I said, I'm taking this way too personal, because Macbeth, initially, I don't think he's a bad person,
Hmm.
but he does very bad choices. And there's no coming back from there.
Which, would that make him then a bad person? Does he evolve into a bad person?
You don't evolve in a bad person. You're either a bad person or or you're a good person who makes bad choices.
Well, I think this play is challenging that. He's challenging us to be open to the possibility that no, that you can become bad. Because yes, he makes bad choices, but when I mean, as we look at this scene when he's plotting Banqua's murder, and you know, you got to, when you see the rest of the play, he becomes a very different person. You know, maybe that was latent inside of him all along. That's another argument that can be made. But it's very key to the play is how he shifts. So if we look at him when he's having trouble deciding, when he has that scene what we just looked at where he says to Lady Macbeth, no, we're not going to do this. We can't do this. She seems to be like the really bad person there, right? She's telling him, no, you have to do this. And are you a man? What kind of a man are you? And so on and so forth. Well, watch how she evolves. So I think what is being explored here is a breakdown of those absolute dichotomies of good and bad.
Can you also please elaborate about the scene where there's the ghost coming in and out, the ghost of Banquo?
Well, it's one of the most important scenes in the play. All right, that's coming up. We're getting there, right?
And when you say indeed that now Macbeth took over and he's the one plotting and playing, but he goes a little bit mad at this feast. So
very much so. It's the beginning of his demise. I mean,
so
in a
it's
big way.
Lady Macbeth who actually still covers up. So we still see that element of her being actually the one in control.
The one in control, but remember, she was left out of the loop. She doesn't see the ghost, right?
Okay.
No one sees the ghost.
Oh, it wasn't clear, by the way, in the text.
No, that's great observation. It's not clear. Often one of the dilemmas that people have when they're reading this or when they're staging this, is there actually a ghost who only makes himself visible to Macbeth? And ghosts are supernatural beings, so that's an option. I'm going to make myself invisible to everyone but Macbeth. Or is it Macbeth's imagination? There is no ghost. It's just in his mind. Remember the dagger. Is this a dagger? Remember we talked about that soliloquy where he's looking at the dagger. There's no dagger there. Is he hallucinating? Same questions are asked when the ghost appears at the banquet. But certainly what we do know is Macbeth is the only one to see it. And so when you look at Lady Macbeth seemingly in control, well, it's because she doesn't know what he's seeing. And of course, right before that, they were both talking about, remember, like we had to do before, we don't reveal anything, right? We got to play it out like everything's good. And of course, Lady Macbeth doesn't know that Macbeth sent murderers to go kill Banquo. So she's seen her husband here in front of everybody losing it. And so she's, in control, saying, well, calm down. Well, what are you doing? And she tries to make excuses, that this is an ailment that he's had for many years, or at one point she's even suggesting, it's just the party atmosphere, i.e. he's drunk. But yes, she's still trying to maintain control, and Macbeth loses control in that scene. Why? Well, seeing the ghost, sure, But remember his agitated state, because what he's also learned is that the murderers didn't kill Banquo's son. And that was a key component of his plot. Because, and yes, as you point out, the prophecy said that Banquo's son will be king. Macbeth, at that point, when he orders the murder of Banquo and Banquo's son, is trying to change the prophecy. If he kills Banquo and then he kills Banquo's son, and there's no line coming from Banquo, then that part of the Weird Sisters prophecy cannot come true, while everything else was coming true. And this, I think, again, speaks to his state of mind, that he doesn't recognize that logic and proceeds anyway, because right now it's all about preserving his status as king and rooting out all threats to his position as king. So he's losing, in a sense, a certain rationale. Maybe one of the reasons why he doesn't tell Lady Macbeth, because maybe he anticipates that she would say, no, you can't do that. Eventually he will. We just stave it off for as long as we can. We don't know, because Lady Macbeth doesn't really engage in that conversation.
Sir,
Yes.
I want to ask, like, when she said about Macbeth making bad choices, like, I didn't understand, like, what did you mean by bad choices? Like, bad choices is not like killing someone. It's not a bad choice. It's his choice.
Well,
That he did that bad thing.
yes, and it's a good point, right? I mean, it's not a bad choice that, you know, he chose to have the chicken instead of the turkey
A
or
bad
whatever.
choice, like it's like doing like a king, like bringing a bad choice to the kingdom. That's a bad choice, but not like killing someone. It's not a bad choice, I think.
No, and this is one of the questions we're meant to ask, right? Remember, we don't have absolute answers to this. The question is, yes, he makes bad choices, but these bad choices are more than just bad choices. It's killing a king. And can you make a choice to kill the king without being inherently bad? Well, that's the question, one of the questions we're asked. That's why he struggles with it. What does that say about Lady Macbeth, right? She didn't hesitate. He hesitated. Once he crossed that line, so in other words, is it that the badness, since we're using that term, was always there, and once that line is crossed, then it comes out in all its evil glory? But again, if you're, you know, these, and we saw this with the short stories we looked at, and see this is paramount in Shakespeare, there is no black or white, good or bad. There are just the human condition.
Like they say, gray.
Like, yes, it's very gray. At least in Shakespeare's world, in this world, it is less gray than other plays, because as we're going to see, Macbeth becomes fairly, certainly in the Shakespearean world, fairly one-dimensional from here on in. You know, he's gone past the point of no return. You take a character like Hamlet, you know, it's almost impossible to lay your finger on 5 different dimensions of Hamlet with any kind of authority. Whereas Macbeth is a play that seems to be more direct, despite it not being direct, but more direct than most of Shakespeare's main character studies, certainly in the tragedies. And I would argue in the history plays as well. The comedies are a different thing, very different kind of literature. But yeah, no, I mean, these are great questions, guys. These are the questions I'm hoping that you're asking. And of course, it comes back to what I was saying earlier as well. Ask these questions, but, you know, ask them with more conviction once you finish the play, right? And ideally then go back and reread it to try and get a better handle on some of the decisions that are being made, okay?
I have another question on this.
Yep.
On this, what I meant before is like good people make bad choices. It's more like if you want something really bad, like in a scenario like we're living in today, one can convince themselves so utterly that this is the right thing to do. So when he goes on to this next event of killing spree, he is convinced that this is what he has to do. There's no right and wrong in his mind. He's doing the right thing. In his brain, he's protecting what's his.
Yeah.
Even though it's totally illogical, because he should, if he takes the prophecy from the three sisters, he should take the prophecy also that, you know, that Banquo's son will be king. But again, coming back to the, like you said, the one-dimensional, he only wants to see what he wants to see, and he sticks with that.
Yeah, very much so. You know, the question, the question is why, right? Because we see that it's certainly at the beginning of the play, he's not an evil character.
But like I see like Banquo is a good character more than Macbeth, because he think like Macbeth, but he don't do the things that Macbeth do.
Oh, very much so.
Like he also think about like doing this bad thing about taking the king place, but he didn't do it because he's inside a good person. But
Well,
Macbeth, he's inside another than good person. Like he have some bad person
quality
inside him.
Well, and it's also because of what he's done and the way he's perceiving things. And Macbeth, when he looks at Banquo, would say, geez, perhaps he's saying in his mind, because we don't really get firm evidence of this, but it's certainly suggested, he's looking at Banquo saying, well, geez, if I was Banquo, I'd probably try to kill me so I could get my son to be king. Whatever his overall logic is, and it is a logic in his mind, what he sees is the potential for Banquo to be a threat, and just the potential enough is for him then to take action. And his approach is one, all right, once I've done the first one, once I've committed the first murder, I've crossed the line. Doesn't matter if I commit more. And now I have to eliminate threats because I don't want to lose this. Remember the theme of ambition and how ambition can blind you and drive you to do things that seemingly are contrary to your nature. But of course, as we were discussing earlier, an element of that has to be somewhere in your nature, and we see this if we compare Macbeth and Banquo, who isn't willing to go as far as Macbeth is. And of course, don't forget the Lady Macbeth dimension, and be particularly attentive to it as you read through Acts 4 and 5. Because what we have of Lady Macbeth up to now, and a lot of people have made this argument, if it wasn't for Lady Macbeth, he wouldn't have killed the king. She's the one in that famous scene who drives him to it. And he shouldn't be held fully responsible because he's under the sway of Lady Macbeth and the power of her personality, which is an extraordinary personality. But of course, one would say that ultimately it has to be his decision, and so on and so forth. Those are the questions we ask. And I love the fact that, you know, if you are relating it in any way to our context, whether it's the context we're in this very difficult situation with the pandemic, or in any other situations that you've had in life where these types of decisions come into play, that's a way to approach it, not when you're writing your essay, but in terms of understanding it. Okay, so we see people today with the pandemic, some people are out there calling it a hoax. Are they bad people? Okay, I mean, that it's different, but it puts it into a context that you can start to relate to it and then take into the play itself to try to understand who they are, why they're doing the things they're doing, without being able to come down on that absolute answer. But you draw on the evidence that we see in terms of the behavior. And again, it's so important to finish the play to get to that final understanding of where Macbeth is and where Lady Macbeth is. Okay? Anyone else want to chime in? This is I love this. God, I missed this.
I have another question if we have time.
Yes. That's what we're here for. I'm going to be doing a video where I'm going to cover all this stuff in any case. And I don't even know if this is going to be recorded. So yes, this is the time for the questions and the discussion.
At the end of the scene 3, there we see that Malcolm says to show an unfelt sorrow in an office. Malcolm and Donald Bain don't want to talk with other people, and he says that we do not want to show an unfelt sorrow. This means that they are not sorry for what has happened. Actually, the thing that I didn't catch is that I don't know if they have seen Macbeth when he was murdering their father or not.
Okay, so tell me specifically what scene, act and scene?
It's scene 3 in Act 2.
Scene 3 in Act 2. So let's go
End of the scene 3.
Okay, so let's just take a look at it so we're all on the same page. Act 3 in Act 2, Scene 3, right?
Yes, at the end of the scene.
It's on the right place. Okay.
Here it is.
Yeah, okay, right.
Sorrow.
So here?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so your question is, okay, now everyone, just to remind everyone, right? Malcolm and Donald Bain are the king's sons, right?
Yes.
Okay, so your question?
First, I want to know if we can surely say that if they both have seen Macbeth when he has killed their father, and the second thing is that are they sorry for that or no?
Okay, good question. And it's a great question insofar as it really encapsulates some of the difficulties of reading a play, right? Because we would know that if we had our narrator to say, yes, they were standing, they saw through the window. And we would also have a clearer understanding as to how upset are they, I think is the second part of your question.
Yes.
So there's no evidence to suggest that they actually saw the killing. What their reason for concern is, again, they understand the politics. The king has been murdered. They're next in line. They obviously didn't know anything about the murder. Their fear and concern is whoever just killed their father is going to try to kill them, because they're very much like their father. And if they are going to take over and be the next king, if Malcolm's going to be the next king, and he isn't a part of the conspiracy to kill his father, and Malcolm knows that he isn't, then his thinking is whoever killed the king could very likely be coming to kill me right now.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a certain logic to that, which takes precedent over their sorrow at their father's death.
Yes.
So the implications are, yes, they're not expressing great sorrow here, but because they're more concerned with, I don't have time to express sorrow, I may be next. So we got to get out of here because there's a murderer on the loose, and that murderer may be coming for us.
Sir,
Yeah.
I want to ask something. Like, who is the old man in scene in Act 2? In the last of the scene, old man and Rose. Rose said that Macbeth is a suspect. Like she's suspicious Macbeth of the death of Duncan.
Okay, so first of all, the old man is basically just that. It's an old man. In this case, as someone who, old men representing wisdom and understanding the past and so on. Okay, so
like he's someone in the somebody like in the church that have some
well, someone
power?
no, I don't see there any indication that he has power. He is probably part of the entourage on some level, probably more part of Macbeth's household, since this is all taking place at Macbeth's castle. Okay, and what we have with Ross here, the suspicion, All right, this comes back to the previous question. Because Malcolm and Donalbain are fearful that the murderer is going to come after them, they leave. They leave right away. Okay, and as a result, right, when Malcolm goes to England, Donalbain goes to Ireland. As a result of them leaving so quickly, it was very easy for Macbeth and others, but Macbeth in all likelihood leading the charge, to put suspicions on them because they killed their father and then they ran before they got caught. Okay, so this is what we're getting a little bit of here, right? With Ross and the old man. And this is where Macduff comes into play. And I remember I mentioned to you, be attentive to Macduff, because Macduff is suspicious of Macbeth. Okay, and we know this because in the scene, he's asked, right? We see here, Ross says, okay, against nature still thrifteth ambition that will raven up thine own life's means, then 'tis most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. Okay, so because the two sons left, they're not there to take over the kingdom. They left because they're scared someone's going to kill them next. And how that looks suspicious, they commit a murder and then they run. Then the next in line for the throne is Macbeth. So Ross is saying, you know, even though this wouldn't be the normal way things would unfold, given these circumstances and the sons leaving, going to England and Ireland, the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. And Macduff responds, he is already named. He's already been made king and gone to Scone, which is a place to be invested, to be officially crowned, where there'll be a ceremony. Now Macbeth will become king. Ross goes on, where's Duncan's body? He's been brought back there to be where he's buried with his family. And then Ross asks Macduff, will you to Scone, where there's going to be the coronation of Macbeth? And Macduff says, no, cousin, out to Fife, which is his place. He's not going to go and see the coronation. Alerts us that he is, because everyone's supposed to go. It's a new king. So all the royalty and the lords and everyone else are meant to go. Macduff doesn't, because he seemingly is suspicious of something.
Rose is also a nobleman of Scotland.
Yeah.
Rose.
Yeah.
But she's a female. She's the only female in the
No,
nobleman.
Ross isn't the female. Okay, so remember, when you're not sure who's who, okay, Ross is a nobleman of Scotland. Nobleman.
But I heard in YouTube, on YouTube they read the story and they put Ross in the voice of a female.
That's not uncommon. There's so many different productions. That's why I've cautioned you about watching these on YouTube and stuff, because what you're getting are interpretations, and not just interpretations. There's been Hamlet's been played as a woman. There's a lot of experimentation in the theater where they change characters to give more roles to women or to be experimental and so on. What we have to go on, and be attentive, please be careful, because when I look at your final exams, it's this text that you're meant to address. Okay, so do not rely on the interpretations. You can watch them as long as you understand that things are changed, and that in the ones that you can watch on YouTube and elsewhere, it's not just that they may change a character from male to female. They do that regularly, especially in more contemporary productions. But you're also getting an interpretation from the director of the play or the movie. I want you to be the directors. I want you to make your own interpretations. Okay, so be careful that you're not overly influenced by what you may be watching on YouTube. If you feel you're up to being able to separate the two, and that it can work as a guide, and there's some ridiculously brilliant productions of Macbeth available to you. All right, but and I'm not going to tell you don't watch them. I will tell you though, if you do watch them, don't let them replace even something as subtle as the gender of a character. Okay, because then if you say that in the final essay, I'm going to take note that it's not the play as it was written. It's from a production that you may have seen. Okay, and also be wary of the interpretations. I mean, you can agree with it and go with it, but you have to always support it with this text, not with the text you may be seeing on YouTube. Okay, is that good? Again, there's a part of me that just wants to give you a list of all the great productions of Macbeth. Okay, I mean, they're fantastic, but I'm just wary of it having too much of an influence on you. I want you to be focused on the reading and to draw your own conclusions as much as possible. Okay. More questions? Now's the time, really. Don't worry if we don't get into it, because we've already been going an hour, and we know these only go like an hour and a half at most. Whatever I'm not covering in this class will be covered in the video that I'll be posting. So this is a time to ask these questions.
From where the three murders come, the Macbeth ordered the entrance of the three murders.
Yeah.
The first murder, the second, and the third.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought it up, because there's I wonder how many of you took note that, let's see, let me get there. Where are we? Hold on.
Like they are the ones that he will put the blame on? Or,
No,
like he want to order them to kill Banquo.
Exactly. So, but note, and it's interesting. Yeah, he's hiring them. Okay, and it's an important scene.
Well, weren't they initially? There were two.
Yes.
And then the third, but like it says third murder, and at the end Macbeth, because he's considered the orchestrator of the murder. So is that the reason why he's considered the third one?
Well, why do you consider him to be the third murderer?
Well, I don't know where it says one.
I'm just curious, because here, right, if we look at the scene 3, here we see enter 3 murderers. But of course, in the conversation that Macbeth has with the murderers, who he is hiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time he talked with the 2 murderers.
There's 2.
And second, the third one, he will talk at last, almost here.
Well, we don't see the third. We only see the third murderer here, right?
No, down. First murder, third murder.
Right.
Banquo.
Yeah, here, right on this page. Right. So we have the first murderer. Okay, let's look at this. This because there's a couple of things I want to touch on here. So let's go up to where am I? Yes, here. Okay, I do want to talk about this soliloquy as well, but let's stick with the murderers for now. So after this encounter, he asked the attendant of the people there that I asked for. The murderers enter. Re-enter attendant with 2 murderers. Okay. Now,
in scene 3, the third murder re-speak.
Yes, the third murder shows up in scene 3. So let's get there. Let's first look at this, and then we'll look at that other scene with the murderers, and try to address the issue that there's a third murderer. Okay, but first, what I want to point out here that I think is important is he's hiring these guys, right, to murder Banquo and Banquo's son. But notice how he has to coax them. Right? It's not as simple as money for hire, murder for hire. He goes in, and why it's important, and you can look at this if you read through it again yourselves, if we don't go into too much detail now, he uses the same tactics on these two murderers that Lady Macbeth used on him previously to get him to commit murder. He's rousing them up. He is talking about their manhood. They're talking about, you're not going to let Banquo, who has wronged you, get away with this, are you? So it's not quite the same as pure murder for hire, where, you know, murder paid assassins don't usually care what the reasons are. And, you know, why is it this type of murder? I think it's very much to show how Macbeth is transforming and is now utilizing the same tactics and tools that Lady Macbeth utilized on him. So in this scene, he very much manipulates them to some extent to make sure that they're going to go through with it, right? And write down, again, you can look at the details.
But maybe they have old history with Banquo.
Well, they have some kind of relationship with Banquo, because it allows Macbeth to tell them who wrought with them and all things else that might to half a soul and to a notion craze, say, thus did Banquo, cross them. Okay, and then he goes on here, right? Do you find your patience so predominant in your nature that you can let this go? Are you so gospel to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand hath bowed you to the grave and beggared yours forever? You're not, you can't let this guy go, right? What kind of a man what kind of men are you if you're not willing to go and take your revenge of sorts?
But what like relationship they have with
We're not-
Banquo, so they want to kill him?
We're not given enough information to know specifically, but enough to know that Macbeth is able to infer that you were wronged by Banquo.
But
Yeah, but-
that, like Banquo, like tried to murder those three men. That's
No.
why they are the
There's no,
underground.
it's not specific to that Banquo tried to murder him. It looks more like that Banquo took some actions that cost these people advantages in life. Okay?
But is it fair to say that they had a kindship to Banquo, otherwise they wouldn't have needed to be persuaded?
Well, that's one of the questions, is why, if Macbeth is king, why does he have to find two killers? Yes, it could be because they are part of Banquo's entourage, if you will, and therefore will have easier access to Banquo. And that would make sense, since clearly they've had interactions with Banquo. They're not just anonymous killers who have been brought into play. And that would make sense, because that would allow them to have closer access to Banquo, right? Again, Banquo is a thane, he's a lord of sorts. So he's going to have an entourage, he's going to have guards and things like that, presumably. But I think, again, with the poetic license that is taken in drama and in literature and in art, is what really works in this scene, and the reason why we have these murderers who actually have some kind of relationship with Banquo is so that we can see how Macbeth is transforming and utilizing the same manipulative tactics that Lady Macbeth used on him. Okay? Now, that takes this scene into account, right? Okay, I'll cover this in more detail in the recording that I'll do. All right, where you can see more how this is detailed. Right, no Banquo was your enemy. All right, so but what do we make of the third murderer? Okay, so when we get into scene 3, okay, enter 3 murderers. But who did bid thee join with us? The first murderer looks at the third murderer. Who told you to join us? There's just 2 of us. Who told thee to join with us? Macbeth. And they go, well, he needs not our mistrust, but he doesn't trust us. I mean, we're capable of doing that ourselves and so on. But they accept him. So there's been lots of speculation in Shakespearean studies as to who the third murderer is. And some people have said it's Macbeth himself. And arguments have been made. I don't find them convincing. I can see where they come from, but I think there would be more for us to solidify, and it doesn't make much sense that he would take such a risk. One of the things that
he is still considered, like, that's what I thought. I thought he would be considered the third murderer.
well, no, and as I said, scholars have taken that approach. So he wants to make sure. In other words, the argument is he wants to make sure it's done properly. But a couple of things that I think work against that is his genuine surprise when the murderers come and tell him at the banquet that the son got away. Obviously, if he was the third murderer, he would have already known that. Okay, but more as well, though, one other thing that I wanted to point out, if I can find it.
But I'm sorry. What the comment you just made is that he would be surprised, but aren't him and his wife very good actors from the beginning? So,
well, I mean that's a good question in terms of, you know, how good of an actor is. He certainly isn't able to hold on to his acting abilities in that banquet scene when he sees the ghost. Right, that's where he completely loses it, and she's still able to hold on to it. There is an argument can be made that it is Macbeth who is the third. As I said, Shakespearean scholars have been making that argument, and this back and forth among, you know, Shakespearean scholarship has been going on for quite a while. It could be. My reading is, and there was, I can find it, another bit of evidence that I think helps it, but I'll mention it. I can't find it offhand here. I wasn't planning on talking about it today, but it will be in the video, because at one point he talks about the spies that he has in Banquo's camp. Okay, again,
sorry, but like there's one time that Banqua, like he don't have like guards, like when he have to walk, he take off of the horse and have to walk. This the specific time that they need like to kill him. The three murders tried to kill him.
yeah. Well, this is it. They're waiting in late for him. Remember, Banquo tells Macbeth up at the top that he has to leave, right? Oops, did I go too far? Yeah. That he has to go somewhere. How long are you going to be? As far, my lord, as will fill up the time twixt this and supper, right? So he has to go somewhere. Macbeth knows it, right? And is it far you ride? As far, my lord, as fill up the time twixt this and supper. I'll be gone until supper time, because supper time's when they're going to have the banquet. Okay, I must be borrow of the night, so he's going to go at night.
What is supper?
Supper, dinner.
Dinner.
Yeah, supper time. Same as up here. Till supper time alone. Okay. So yeah, I mean that's why Banquo leaves, and then the murderers come in and they set out to ambush him at one of the stops because they know where he's going. Okay. Now, again, the question as to whether that's Macbeth or not as the third, you can make the argument that it is. As I said, many have. Then yes, that would feed into him being an extraordinary actor when he feigns surprise, if he is feigning surprise, that Banquo's son got away. Okay. Let's go look at that scene if we can. Okay, so this is the actual murder. This is one we were looking at. And of course, the only reason that we would think that it's, and actually, let me ask you, and I know I asked you, I think you answered, but I don't remember your answer. Why do you think it's Macbeth is the third murderer?
it says, scene 3, enter 3 murders. First murder, who did, okay, then third murder, Macbeth, then second murder.
Yeah.
So it's the sequence and order of how it's written. Only, like, it, I don't know, if I'm reading it that way, where I'm saying, okay, the first murder, then the third, they're stating Macbeth, and then there's the second murders. Well, we already know there's 2.
Well,
But
Really, I don't know. It's my opinion.
no,
no,
it's,
I don't think like the third murder is because like because of the conversation between them. The first murder, who did the third join with us? Like who told you to join with us? Macbeth. Macbeth ordered him to join them. He's not Macbeth, the third murder.
yeah. Again, that is the other possible reading of it. It's as I said, it has been engaging for Shakespearean scholars for a while. There's other things that maybe I'll touch on in the video that I'll be posting, where I mean I could spend a whole 4-hour class talking about this debate, and that'll take us, I think, too far away from what we're trying to do with the play. But in terms of just this here, I forgot about I had this. That's what I wanted. Okay, so yes, what we have is the first murderer. I enter 3 murderers. The first murderers, but who did bid thee to join with us? And the third murderer answers Macbeth. Okay, is that me? Okay, so the third one, but this quagmire as to who the third murderer is never fully addressed. There is a reference, which I will try to find for you, earlier, where Macbeth is talking about the spies that have been in place. And there's a lot of scholarship who are countering the argument that the third murderer is Macbeth, is by saying it has to be one of the spies that would have been with Banquo and his entourage as they travel. Okay? But the fact that you guys are noticing this and discussing it is wonderful. That's how that's the ideal way of approaching it, is to ask these questions, as long as you don't let your frustrations get the better of you when there's no concrete answers. Okay? Okay, whoops, what is this? Okay. Any other questions? Again, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but other questions or concerns, or just general observations. No?
Uh, like when they tried to kill him, there's a scene that one of the murderers say, "Why did you let it go?" Like, and they try. I don't know, like specifically what.
Well, okay, it's a great question insofar as it allows me to address which I've addressed many times. One of the challenges that we have when we read a play. So this whole scene, right, you try to envision and imagine 2 things. One is, how would you stage this on a stage? How would this pan out on a stage? Because we're given very little direction. And try to imagine how different it would be if it was made into a film. You could have so much going on in this scene. How is it portrayed to us? Okay, so we have the conversation. Then enter Banquo and Fleance his son with a torch. Third murder, 'tis he. First murder, stand to. Banquo, it will be rain tonight. First murder, let it come down. They said on Banquo. Okay, that's quick. What does he mean, it will be rain tonight? Let it come down. Right? We're given nothing there to help us. Okay? Is it him pulling out a sword, realizing he's being ambushed, and say, it will be rain tonight? I'm like, it's going to rain blood? And the first murder saying, let it come down, and we're going to fight. They set upon Banquo. Oh, treachery, fly, good Fleance, fly, 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 thou mayest revenge, oh, slave. And he dies. And his son escapes.
Banquo dies.
Oh, yeah.
So Banquo dies and the son escapes.
Yep. And then again, always be attentive to these, in this edition that are set in italics. But yes, I mean, and it's a good observation, because if you're not paying attention, you don't even see it. Because what are you going to see, especially in this edition? I don't know how it is in ours here. Take a better look. But it's barely noticeable. Okay, so that challenges us to try to envision what actually transpired here. We're not told that, he takes one swipe with his sword and he got him from behind and he jumped here and he jumped there and Banquo fought fiercely and held them off for 20 minutes. No, we get none of that.
But it's not like that obvious what they said. He dies.
Yeah. So that is something that's essential when you're reading these plays, and this is what I've been trying to always emphasize to you, is be very attentive to the very few stage directions when someone is coming on the stage, when someone is leaving the stage, when there's an aside, right? You have to be very attentive to all those elements. Don't just read the dialogue. Look at everything else. All right, so and this, I think it's better in our version if I can find it. Was it scene 3, right?
Yeah. Act 3, scene 3.
So how do they do it? Act scene 3. Yeah, I mean, it's subtle in our edition as well, right? It just says dies. That's it. And it tells us that his son escapes.
But I think he will re-enter like his son. He will reclaim because he's not like the sons of Duncan. They escape from everything, but I think he will recome for the murder of his father.
Well, and will the others come to avenge their father's murder? This is exactly what you want to be doing, is as you're reading it, because if you haven't finished it yet, is to anticipate what's going to happen. All right? In this particular play, more so than most of the tragedies by Shakespeare, you can get a pretty good idea, right? This can really play out in only one way, but you never know with Shakespeare. So what we have is now we have Banquo's son has escaped, and of course we'll find out later on then now they're going, oh my God, every time a man of importance dies, his son or sons flee, and that casts suspicion on them. So there are going to be thoughts that Banquo was killed by his son. But that becomes a little too obvious. And then when people are starting to discuss that, and we see this in the final scene of this act, that coupled with Macbeth's losing it, and he does lose it at this banquet, all right, when the ghost of Banquo vanishes there, but when he first comes in, right, the ghost of Banquo enters and sits, not only enters, but sits in Macbeth's place. And even here, they're telling him, Macbeth, sit down. What are you doing? And he's going, I can't sit. There's no place for me to sit. Because he's seen Banquo's ghost in his chair. Everyone else is looking, going, there's no one sitting in your chair. It is, and I don't want to start it now because I won't have time to go through the whole thing. You look for this when I do the video, and by all means, maybe revisit this because it's an amazing scene, and you have to try to envision it, because all we have here are the words, right, of Macbeth, but he is reacting to seeing a ghost. Now, yes, this is a world that has a lot of supernatural beings going on. We see the weird sisters and prophecies and the astrological symbolisms that we've encountered and so on. But it's, of course, not just because of the ghost. It's also, and that reminds me of the thing that I do want to mention, which I think ties into this. It's also something that really starts this third act with, and I'll leave you with this. Where is Lady Macbeth? Not here yet. Okay, because both of them. Here we go. I think this is it. well, again, I'll have to touch on it when one of the things you notice here, sorry, I can't find the exact quote because we kind of jumped all over the place, and we do see it a bit in this soliloquy, is both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Now, this scene starts later. Both of them are encountering something that surprises them. And that's, okay, they did it. They killed the king. Fate or fortune worked in their favor. The king's sons left, not so they didn't challenge his ascension to the throne. We got it. We're king and queen. Why am I not satisfied? The suggestion is that you've achieved what the ambition initially set both of them out to achieve, which was Macbeth becoming king. Now you've achieved it. Why is there no relief from anxiety and troubled sleep? Okay, this becomes particularly important, well, with both of them, but with Lady Macbeth, especially since we've been seeing Lady Macbeth as the one who is seemingly more bloodthirsty in a way in her pursuit of ambition. How they react to the fact that, okay, it's as if they're saying, geez, this isn't what I thought it would be. Macbeth takes that to go out and, consolidate his power, eliminate his enemies, have to preserve this. Now capable of doing, murdering arguably his best friend, Banquo. Doesn't matter anymore. So there's no rest. There's no satisfaction. There's no serenity here. And Lady Macbeth goes through a similar realization. But of course, it manifests in Lady Macbeth differently than it manifests in Macbeth. And how that manifests and what that does to their characters and their behavior and arguably their minds is what Acts 4 and 5 are really about. Okay. So keep that in mind. If you haven't read Act 3, please do. It would be probably to your advantage before you watch the video that I'll be posting either tonight or tomorrow. If you have read Act 3, read ahead, but think about coming back. If nothing else, to watch that banquet scene, perhaps after you watch the video that I'll be posting, or just reread it yourself. This always as well, look for these soliloquies, right? What the soliloquy is when it's just, usually Macbeth in this case, just Macbeth on stage with a long, not just an aside, because an aside is when there's other people on the stage. It's when he's alone on stage with a long speech. Much is revealed in the soliloquies. We saw the one with the invisible dagger before. Okay, and much is revealed about the state of mind of the character when they deliver these soliloquies. In Shakespeare, the most famous probably is Hamlet's "to be or not to be." Okay, so be attentive to this, which I'm going to look for a better edition of this text to use when we do this, because it doesn't even have the line numbers, which is, I'm realizing, very frustrating. But in your book, in our book, this would be right on page 42. So it's like a line 47 of Act 3, Scene 1. These are important. And I will, if not this week, next week, and maybe I'll do this in class next week. I want to talk about these soliloquies and how they all relate to each other. It'll probably be in 2 weeks. I can't do it until you've read all the soliloquies. As an alert, I suppose, to those of you who have found the ability to be here for classes. I don't know if this is going to record, but I'll repeat it to the others as well. The reason I am emphasizing the soliloquies is, first, they're very important in Shakespearean drama and Shakespearean plays. They're extraordinarily revealing, and they touch on so many of the other aspects. So when you're reading them, see if you can find that. 2, second reason, makes for a great question on the final exam. Just putting that out there. I have not decided on the questions yet. Just putting it out there. Okay. Oh boy, a lot of chatting. I'll have to read. If there's anything present, because I'm not great at multitasking when it comes to technology, so I haven't really had a chance to read through everything in the chat. I will, but if there's any specific questions related to what we've been discussing or that you have in general at this point, now's the time.
It has nothing to do with Macbeth, but it's just to know, are we going to get our grades like this week?
Oh yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, maybe before you joined, they're marked. I just have to enter them into Omnivox. It will be either tonight or tomorrow. And the reason I say that, just remind the others that I've already mentioned this to, my youngest son is going on to Zoom classes with his high school. It's now been mandated. It's the first one. So I'm not going to have access to the computer for pretty much the rest of the afternoon. But I'll try to get him on tonight if I don't collapse. But you'll have them by tomorrow at the latest. They're all marked. So I just need to enter them. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, but how to write Cyrillically? I don't know. I'm trying the word Cyrillically for the Macbeth. Like you said, that they are very important.
Oh, soliloquies.
Yeah, how to write that?
Oh, soliloquy.
I'm trying to write it, but like it's not working out.
Okay. Yeah, I should have talked more about this. That's on me. Hold on. Because it is tricky spelling, I want to make sure I don't give you the wrong. So it's SOLIL. Sorry, SOLILOQUY.
UY?
Yeah, you know what? Let me hold on.
Write it on the text.
Someone told me, I haven't tried this yet.
On the chat, you press on chat and then you can write.
Can everyone see this?
Yeah, it's a blank page.
Yes. Doesn't work. Okay. Oh, it does work. Okay. SOLI. Soliloquy. Everyone can see that, right? I was told by one of my colleagues that,
Yes.
I can use this like a blackboard. I haven't played around with it yet.
Yeah, you can write whatever you want.
I can write. I can type in. I like to write. I want to use it the way I would use the whiteboard in class. I miss it so much. Okay, so everyone got that? Yeah. So soliloquy, we will talk more about it. I'm not saying it's going to be on the final exam. I am saying it's probably to your benefit to be familiar, recognize the soliloquies where they are, and to think about what are their similarities and so on. And I will be talking about it, I promise. It's also great, incredibly revealing to have a better understanding of the character development and the play as a whole. Any other questions? Okay.
So for this week, do we go to like Act 4 or?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, with the way I want to, it's a good question. Yes, you should finish this week, Act 3, be reading Act 4 for next week. In an ideal world, just read as much as you can. I mean, you really do want to have it finished no later than 2 weeks from now. Okay, so, and that'll still give us, what, let me look at this calendar again. Okay, let me be a little more specific, sorry. You should really have the play finished by the 18th. Okay, because we have 3 more classes. We have one on the 11th, we have another one on the 18th, and one on the 25th. It is to your advantage to have it finished by next week, but by the 18th, finish the play, so that'll give us 2 full classes where I can discuss the play with you knowing that you've all finished it, so that I can bring up things without feeling that you're going to be lost because you haven't finished the play.
Okay.
That gives us 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks will be leading directly up to your exam, right? Remember, I'm going to give you your exam either on the 18th or the 25th. Either way, you'll have 2 weeks to write the exam. Okay? I say the 25th if I can go and have you hand it in as late as the 8th. I'm not sure they're going to let me. So in which case, it'll have to be on the 18th, and then I'll have you hand it in to me, submit it to me on the latest date possible, depending on when I have to enter the grades. Okay?
But the semester ends on the 25th.
The last class we have scheduled is the 25th. Then we go into the following week is exam week.
Okay. So technically there's only Act 4, so there's 2 acts left.
4 and 5.
And all the other pages in the back, like the source of Macbeth, do we have to read that?
No. If you want to, it's chock full of wonderful information, but no, I mean, you certainly don't have to. And I haven't been recommending it because at this stage, I really want you to focus just on the close reading of the play. If you, I mean, obviously, if you want to, and a lot of it's dry material. It's about his sources. You can also read the introduction. It's quite informative, helps to discuss a lot of the different ways that scholars and students have approached Macbeth. My thinking is, sure, but not until you finished reading the whole play. And if you have time to read the added material, be honest with you, I'd rather you read the play a second time so that you can get these things yourself. Then, if you've had a chance to read the play through a second time, yeah, then go to there's so much written on Shakespeare. But that being said, you do it whatever way you're comfortable with. My big thing is to really focus in on the text, to get familiar with the language, with the structure of a play, particularly a Shakespearean play, before you start looking for more things to bring in. There's enough there just in the text itself, I would argue. Okay? Is that good?
I have a question. Sorry.
Yep.
Calm down a little bit for the moment. So about the reading, I'm getting very nervous because I'm also teaching 3 of my kids homeschooling.
Right.
Is it really bad if I do like 1 act per week? Because
No.
I don't see myself.
No, if you, in the way I set this up, if you look at our outline, it was 1 act a week.
Okay.
So
Because I mean, the noise level here in the background is unbelievable.
We do the best we can. I would be saying the same thing if we were in the classroom. I'd be telling you, ideally, read the whole thing in 1 sitting, okay? But no, for the most part, I'm following the outline. It is 1 act a week, and we do it for 5 weeks. So if we're following that model, you'd finish Act 3 this week, Act 4 next week, Act 5 the following week. Okay, you do what everyone we do the. I mean, it's like my situation now. With, I'm used to after this class doing so much on the computer. Now I'm going to let my son come on it, and we have to do what we have to do, and that is always understood from my end. So don't ever hesitate to ask those types of questions. It's a difficult situation. I want you guys first and foremost, I'm just really hoping that you find some appreciation of Shakespeare, because it's Shakespeare. It's great, in my opinion. it's great stuff. But it's also, you know, when studying literature and English, yes, it's part of it, but it is also just so much there that I think is just wonderful. So, yes, one act a week. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So if this recorded, I'll have it posted later this evening. Okay. Fingers crossed on that, because I thought this was great. Guys, I love it when you are engaging. Okay. You remember that way back when we were in a classroom together. Seems like so long ago. Okay. So try to keep that atmosphere up. I think it benefits all of us to hear different perspectives and to have different ideas brought forth, not just me droning on like I do in the pre-recorded videos. All right, everyone, be safe. Contact me if you have any issues at any time. Your grades, as I said, will be posted either later tonight, latest tomorrow, and continue reading and stay safe, please. Okay? Bye, guys.